What's up, folks, and welcome back to part 2 of Luther Never Too Much. Now, I'm going to recap. In part 1, we covered Luther's influences by the Motown and Philly sound. We covered him performing in different groups, him meeting David Bowie, and that really helping to catapult his career, and him touring with Bette Midler. That's where we left off. All right, so here we are, part 2, Luther Never Too Much. So Luther is working regularly now. I mean, the David Bowie hookup worked out, the Bette Midler hookup worked out, and now he's working. So he's still struggling, though, to get a deal. But he is working. And he has his group, Luther, that he's been performing with, in addition to the touring and the performances with those other previous artists that I mentioned. Luther actually wrote a song for a Broadway play called The Wiz. Yes, the one and only The Wiz that went on to become a motion picture movie starring Diana Ross. And he was also at this time, again, like I said, he was performing with his group, Luther, and his group was opening for Marvin Gaye. Now, there's a musician by the name of Nile Rodgers, and you may remember him from Chic. He had a group named Chic. Their song, their big hit was Le Freak. Ah, freak out. Let's freak, says she. Freak out. Yes. So, the one and only Nile Rodgers is in that group with Luther. So Nile says that they would perform, for Marvin Gaye. They would open up for Marvin Gaye. And then at intermission, they would go over to the studio and record. Actually, they recorded Everybody Dance, do-do-do-do, clap your hands, clap your hands. They recorded that song. Luther and his group actually helped to develop the Chic sound. In addition to working with Chic, he also recorded on Sister Sledge's We Are Family album. All right. And Luther mentions that it was very fortunate for him that during that time, that was like the disco era in the 70s, that he emerged as a single artist, like a real singer, from that time period to be able to pursue a solo career. So as he's working more and more, he starts to do jingles, right? And so some of the jingles that he sang for was Juicy Fruit Gum, Lowenbrow Beer, Miller Beer. He did some jingles for NBC. And his very first jingle that he performed on was Gino's Pizza. Now, Gino's Pizza actually was the commercial that birthed his signature bottom to top riff that we all know and love. The ooh, that came from that commercial jingle. And what happened was the producer, and her name was Deborah McDuffie, asked for him to give something to the song that, really made it feel like, the food was sizzling. And that's when Luther created that bottom to top riff that we all know and love. And in fact, again, that was his very first jingle. And so from that point, he said when he did that, he noticed in the control booth that the producers were going crazy. They were jumping up and down. And so he was like, okay, I'm going to put that one in my pocket. Y'all won't hear it not one time again on another jingle. This is going to be mine. It's going to be my signature thing. And that's what it was from that point on. He never did that in another jingle. And that was interesting considering that, hey, that was the very first jingle that he did. Valerie Simpson, which we all know from Ashford and Simpson, she mentions that she was a part of that jingle world too. And that's how she began to know Luther Vandross. Initially, by his voice and his sound, she could recognize who he was. Singing jingles for Luther became very lucrative. He described it actually as a wonderful period in his life, and singing jingles allowed him to move him and his mother out of their house into a new home. And Luther became the #1 go-to person for background singing and for commercials. So Luther begins to sing with the group Change. And Change was a studio group. And initially he sang background with them. But, of course, he has the golden voice, right? The golden tones. When members of the group start to, hear his voice, they asked him to audition for some lead parts, which he did. So he auditioned for Searching, that song, Searching, Searching, and Glow of Love. That song has a whole bunch of words in it. All I remember is, I'm not even going to try and sing it. But anyway, Glow of Love. And if you remember from part 1, Fonzie Thornton, who's a lifelong friend and music collaborator, he sang, in Luther's group. He said that Luther nailed those 2 songs in one take, right? One take is you go in, you record the song, and the first time you sing it is just golden. You don't need to record it again because this is going to be what we put out. This is going to be what it is. And so on both those songs, he recorded them in one take. Of course, that is quite phenomenal. For those artists who are persnickety, even though you do it on the first take, you might want to do it again, and again, just to see, if you can get better than the first time. But sometimes the first time is the best take. The producers of Change asked Luther, because, those songs did really, really well. They asked him if he would be the official lead of Change. And Luther was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm a writer and producer. I want to do my own stuff. I don't want people feeding me other stuff that I have to sing. I want to perform my own song. So he stood 10 toes down on that, and he refused that offer. And he wanted to stay true to performing his material. So Roberta Flack comes on the scene, and she notices Luther, and now, of course, he's been doing session work. He's been singing with his group and other groups and things. And so she was like, well, I know you work, during the week, but perhaps, you'd be interested in going out with me on the weekends, to perform. And so he was like, all right. And then this is in the 80s. And so he was like, all right, I'll take you up on that. I'll do that. And so he begins singing with Roberta Flack on the weekends. And Luther would stand in for Roberta Flack in sound check. So in those instances where she wouldn't be able to make sound check, he would, sing her songs to make sure that the mics, are at the right levels and everything. At one time, he was doing the sound check, and Roberta Flack came in and heard him. And so Luther likes to say, according to Roberta Flack, that she fired him. But that's not exactly how, she sees it. So I'm going to read a quote. I'm going to read Luther's quote first. And he says that Roberta Flack comes up to him and says, you're getting a little too comfortable sitting on this stool in the background singing oohs and ahs. I really want you to make your own statement and make your own record. And she, in effect, fired me. That was Luther's statement. Now, Roberta Flack says, Luther Vandross likes to say that I fired him, but I never really fired him. What I did was to encourage him to believe in his own ability to produce his first album. So I don't think that, Luther was being facetious when he says that, Roberta Flack fired him. But yes, in essence, it kind of was the encouragement to go out, jump the nest, and do your own thing. So once that professional relationship ended, Luther began to put all his monies from, the touring that he was doing, the groups that he was in, the session work, and the commercials. He started putting all that money back into his project, right? To record his demo. Now, there was a gentleman, Marcus Miller. Marcus Miller is a musician. He plays the guitar. I believe he's a bassist. And so he was stating that, when Luther shared with him that he wanted to be a solo artist, he was like, why do you want the headaches of that? You're doing good. You're doing background. You like the go-to guy. Why would you want those headaches? And so Luther was like, look, I got these things in my head. I got these songs. I got these sounds in my head that I need to get out. That's why I'm pursuing this. Luther began again to put all his money into his project, and he begins to record. So he could only record on Sunday mornings. Those were the only times that were available for him to record in the studio. And everyone who participated on the project were paid on spec. Now, being paid on specs means there's no guarantee that you're going to get paid at all. Basically, it's in hopes that, you do get paid. If the project is selected, then you may get some money on the back end, but there's no guarantees up front that you're going to get paid, which it's a challenging position to be in. However, when you have great people around you who trust you and who trust in your talent, I can see how someone would be able to pull this off. And he was. And so some of the musicians that he used that were paid on spec for his demo were Marcus Miller, the bassist that I just mentioned, Nat Adderley, who is now, he was like the musical director. All the musicians, Cissy Houston, which we mentioned before from part 1. Remember, she was in Sweet Inspirations, and she's also, the famous mother of our beloved Whitney Houston. And all the singers, they all sang for no money, right? And then they created Never Too Much. So Nate Adderley Jr. was the musical director of this project. And he says that song was recorded in one take. So Luther is establishing himself as the one take wonder. There's another artist who would also be considered a one take wonder, and that was Aretha Franklin. Some of them argue that it was, she didn't want to sing it again, and others argued that it was, it was just perfect on the first take. So who to believe? I don't know. Back to Luther. Okay, so Nate Adderley, the musical director, says again that the song was recorded in one take and that the song was very simple and very easy to play. He didn't hear a hit necessarily, but he knew that, the song sounded different from what was on the radio. Luther said that, again, he was looking for deals. All of the record companies passed on him. CBS, Epic, and Columbia. They all passed. It was like, oh, it's a no for us. Thanks. Good luck. However, Luther did not give up. He went back to someone at Epic and he got the deal. Never Too Much earned 2 Grammy nominations and stayed on the charts for 84 weeks. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button for part 3.